Hi everybody, welcome to a video on cycle frames. I'm respraying this cycle frame. It's actually a new cycle frame. First of all, actually, before I go off on my description, an apology for the white balance. The camera was, for some reason, I normally leave it set on either auto or tungsten light. Although it's fluorescent light, it seems to come out better with tungsten light setting, but for some reason it was put on cloudy, so it's come out really warm. I've tried to do what I can in the editing software to make it look a bit more normal, and I've succeeded to a degree, but it's not brilliant. But obviously once you've done it, you've done it, so apologies for that. So cycle frame, it's actually a new cycle frame that I bought off eBay. You can see there was some damage on it where the bottle holder clamp goes. There was some damage on it, and the guy on eBay said that they're about 20 odd years old, and I'm building up a retro bike because I broke one of my frames, old 26-inch bike, so I'm building up a retro one. And this was in aubergine, which is not really my colour. It's not a bad colour, I suppose, but it's not really my colour. So I set about changing the colour of it and removing the corrosion. And the frame was quite cheap, but, you know, the guy pointed out that there was corrosion there. As I say, the frame is new, never been used, but you get aluminium corrosion sometimes in storage. So I had to prepare that, and the best way to prepare the surface with this particular frame, because there's a few ways of doing it. One is to completely strip it, so you put you know, a powerful paint stripper on it and remove the paint altogether and start with a bare metal frame, and then you would etch prime or epoxy prime, whichever you desire, to give it a good surface for the paint to adhere on. You'd then smooth it down and then apply your base coat, as I'm doing in this video, and then apply your lacquer, you know, matte lacquer, gloss lacquer, whatever you want to do as your final coat. So, I mean, I'm not overly worried by weight, and I say weight, it's just that by leaving the old paint on, you're probably saving about, I don't know, 50 grams, something like that, which sounds not a lot, but to some people in cycling, 50 grams is you know, worth a load. So you would strip it if that's what you wanted, but in my case there was no need to strip it, I didn't think anyway, because the rest of the frame was fine. So for the rest of the frame, I went over it with a red Scotch-Brite, which is like a medium Scotch-Brite. Grey is fine, and the green is coarse. So I went over it with a red Scotch-Brite, which will, with the scratches, give the paint enough adhesion to stick and give a good finish. So you go over the whole frame with Scotch-Brite, apart from the area you've repaired. The area you've repaired, you would do a similar thing as if it was bare metal. So I rubbed down all the surface corrosion, made sure it was as smooth as reasonably possible with 320 grit paper and then some 500 grit paper. You want it reasonably coarse, so, you know, 320 to 500 should be fine. And then I put an etch primer just on that area where I'd gone through to the bare metal, and just overlap it slightly onto the existing paintwork. And then you sand it down and eventually go over the thing with about 800 grit. You don't want to go too fine. If you're just going to lacquer it, you'd go over it with anywhere between 800 and 1500, ideally about 1200, because the lacquer would fill in the scratch marks made by the 1200, the 1000 or 1500, and still adhere nicely. Sorry. So you need to, obviously preparation is the key. The result, to get a good result, you need it to be good underneath. So it's worth spending time doing the preparation on your frame. So there's a couple of small marks on the lacquer on this, and you just rub that down so that you're through to the existing paintwork. As long as it's nice and smooth, you should be okay. But anything that's rough, you're not going to cover it. Paint isn't a filler, it's a cover, so it mimics what's underneath. So if it's not good underneath, it's not going to be good on top. It might be slightly better, but it's not going to be very good. So anyway, that's the preparation to get through to this stage. Now, again, I don't know whether you watched the video I did of a set of forks for someone, but this is exactly the same principle. So you literally give really light strokes. The gun is set. I'll go for the gun in a minute, but it's set at about 1.5 bar at the moment, so it's not on the full pressure you would probably normally spray at. I say about. I've set the airline to pump through 2.5 psi, 2.5 bar, which is about about 35 psi. And I just regulate the gun however I feel at the time. But for the finish, I'm after, so I don't use a gauge as such. So literally just small amounts of paint being applied to all the areas, and the idea of that is to not get a reaction with anything that's down there before. If you put too much, if you make it too wet, the thinners in the paint has got enough time to react with whatever was on the frame before, and you start to get little fry-ups. So just really, patience is the key. Just take your time. I've left this is quite a long video. It's about 24 minutes altogether, but it is completely real time, apart from the gap in between to allow one lot of paint to dry. So it's about 10 minutes longer. The whole process is about 10 minutes longer overall, but the actual spraying process is what you see. So this is the sort of time you're looking at doing a bike frame, as long as the preparation is good underneath. But if you're using spray cans, you know, the principle is exactly the same, whether it's a spray can or a spray gun. You do get a bit more versatility with a spray gun. You know, it's more adjustable to what you want, you know, the fluid output, etc. But you can achieve perfectly good results with a spray can if you know, if that's your setup, if that's all you've got to use. Then, you know, don't think, oh well, he's got a spray gun, he's bound to do it all right, because it's not always the case. Another thing you'll notice that I've got the frame hanging from it's actually a coat hanger. So one of the cross sections in the garage, I put the coat hanger through one side, and then it just literally pins underneath the bottom bracket and wires across the top, so it allows me to move the frame about. And because frames, it's not like a car panel or a bike fairing or something like that, where you've got I mean, a bike fairing not always, but you've got quite good access to something, you know, it's just like a big flat surface. Bike frames obviously aren't like that. There's loads and loads of nooks and crannies, so you need to move it about a bit, because you need to get underneath, on top, and inside sometimes. So, you know, you need to be able to move it about. So whatever you do, make sure you're making it secure, because you don't want the frame falling down halfway through, because it will make a right mess. And you need to be able to move it around. So satisfy yourself that you've got enough to move the frame around without it causing any damage, and you should be okay. Now, what you'll see is a bit later on. I can't remember where I am at the moment. I think we're still on the first lot coat, but I did I refilled the pot, so I didn't fill the pot up fully at first. I don't know why, I never do, but I had to refill the pot, and it was I didn't put the lid on properly, so it came down the side, etc. And because you're aware that you're sort of making a video, you just try and get on with it, and it was actually quite detrimental really, because a couple of spots, small spots, come off the gun, just dripped off the gun and went across the top bar, the top crossbar at the top, underneath, and you get this like raised little lump, which is not the end of the world if you do get little imperfections, but it's the only one on this, but it was there nonetheless. So you'll see me towards the end spraying more over the bottom of the crossbar, simply to build up a layer of paint, and then you can take, or what I did was I took some 1000 grit wet and dry, and you just sand it down until it's all nice and smooth. Leave your base coat in your gun or in the can, what you've got left, and when you smooth that off, just obviously make sure it's clean and there's no residue or dust anywhere, and just respray that area, and it blends in nicely to the rest of it. So it's not the end of the world. Costs about 10-15 minutes, but if I'd have spent a minute more, or even half a minute more, seconds really I suppose, just making sure that the lid was on properly on the gun, it would have saved me a load of time. But anyway, the gun I'm using, I know lots of people, me included I suppose, we like our spray guns, and we like to know what the hardware people are using is an SRI Pro Lite, a Devilbiss SRI Pro Lite. Now I think they're called Techna in the US, but I'm not entirely sure. But it's Devilbiss in the UK. They're made in the UK, and most of Europe and that they're sold as Devilbiss, and in Australia, places like that. But I think the States they might be Techna still. I know the bigger guns are, but very, very good gun. Now this is a 0.8 tip. And the reason for using a 0.8 tip is because it's obviously what you're spraying isn't actually very big, very wide, so you don't need a huge fan. All you're going to do is, with a huge fan, you're going to waste material. Now you can, on all the guns, you can make the fan smaller, and this isn't actually isn't set on full fan. It's probably set on 2/3 of a fan. But I always find that the smaller you make the fan pattern, the more difficult it is to control the fluid, and the more difficult it is to get an even distribution. So I tend to leave a wider fan than is needed. Obviously you get some overspray, but if you're not putting loads out, you're not overspraying too much, so you're not wasting too much material, and you're not making too much of a mess of your workshop area. So I can't remember where this is. I don't know whether this is the second coat or it's still the first coat, I think you'll find. So I'm literally, as I say, it's real time, so you literally just playing away at it, keep checking every single little nook and cranny to make sure you haven't missed anything, because the last thing you want to do is get to the lacquer stage and then realise that you've missed something. I'm going to do a separate video for the lacquer, because this one did go on so long, and I didn't really want to chop it too much, because it will give you an idea of how long you should be spending on something like this. Whether it's a really old rusty frame or a new frame, brand new, bare metal frame or whatever, it should take a similar amount of time to this, simply because it should be in the same condition as this. So if it was a new frame and was bare metal, you would have epoxy primed it or etch primed it or whatever, sanded it down, and it would be the same as what I'm doing on this video. Likewise, if it was an old frame you'd done a few repairs on, got rid of a few rust spots, rubbed it all down, primed the areas that you needed to, and got it all prepared for paint, it should take exactly the same time, because your preparation is the key. And with all these things, the final result is always a reflection on the the preparation that's gone in beforehand, because, as I say, you can't put paint over something to disguise it, because it doesn't. you know, if there's a bump in the middle and you're spraying something, that bump's still going to be there. It might be, you know, a couple of microns higher because you've got a layer of paint on it, but it's still going to be noticeable. Normally more so, especially once the lacquer goes on. So do take your time and make sure you're doing every single nook and cranny. A bike frame, as with most things, but a bike frame certainly, because some of it's upside down, some of it's on top, so if that makes sense, you're doing the underneath and the top of something. So the top of something, if it's flat, you could in theory lay more paint on because it would stay stationary. It may try and run over the edges. But if you're doing something upside down, you don't want to put too much paint on because it will just drop. And that becomes even more critical with the lacquer, which, as I say, I'm doing in a separate video. So you need enough to give it, in the case of paint, a good covering, but you don't really want runs. The base coat you'll get away with it, but certainly the lacquer you don't. So that's the first stage. So that's how long I spent, about 15 minutes spraying the complete frame, and that's just in little sprays, nothing, you know, nothing too saturating, etc. Just to key everything in and make sure nothing reacts. So the second full coat, I say second application, is going to be much more. More thicker, so it's going to go on. There's going to be more of it going on, and you'll see that I'm putting extra bits on the down frame, which is where the repair was. And the reason I'm doing that is because it's a grey primer, and with a grey primer, the colour, it will what's underneath will have an effect on your top coat. So because the rest of the bike was aubergine, the rest of the frame was aubergine and a part of it was grey, if you just put two standard coats on it, you would still notice that grey patch. It would come up a little bit darker because the underneath is darker. Although you've covered the whole surface, it will come up a bit darker. So just make sure you're putting a reasonable amount of paint on that, so that when you do the other coats, it all matches in and you don't see a darker area. And that's true with any panels really. So I'm still doing the top coat now, the final top base coat. So the gun, I don't know whether you can see actually, but the gun, it is coming out thicker. But again, you're still trying to be careful enough not to put too much on there, because you don't really want runs. It's not the end of the world, but I can't remember the saying. Was it more taste, less haste, or something like that? You know, you think, oh no, I'll put it on a bit thicker, get it done, and all that, and you end up actually going backwards in the end. So just keep applying and applying, and don't get over enthusiastic with it, because you don't need to. There's a different technique for doing the top coat, you know, the lacquer, which you'll see in the other video if you can stand the strain of watching it. You can see in that there's a slightly different technique with the lacquer, in that you do need to keep some kind of continuity for it to flow into each other, and it is tricky because you want to get enough on there to give you a good hard finish, and to give you a good shine or sheen if it's a matte colour, but you really don't want too many runs, especially on a bike frame. And I say that because it's quite intricate. If you've got a flat panel on a car and you get a few runs, you can normally use a blade to get it off, or just sand that little area down by hand, and just, you know, smooth it out and just polish it off. And as long as you haven't gone too mad and it, you know, it matches the rest of the paint, you get away with it quite easily. On a frame, it's quite awkward, especially on some of the more intricate parts, because it's not that easy to polish. You'd have to do it all by hand, which takes longer. So if you can get it right in the first place, it does actually mean that the whole operation takes less time, because you haven't got go back and redo things afterwards. So there's about another 5 minutes, no, about another 4 minutes to go. So we're nearly there now. What you want to do also with a bike frame, I mean, I'm holding the part there with my finger, which is a part where the brakes go. So try and get yourself, even if you've like just got a mount for the disc brake or something like that, and maybe just put a screw in it, something like that, so that you've got something to hold with your hand that's not obviously going to touch the paintwork, and you can move the frame around. Either that, or have the frame where it's accessible completely 360 degrees around, so that you can get it all done without touching the frame, because obviously if you touch the frame you're just going backwards big time. So you know, you have to be really careful, and it's also a really good reason to show you why a minigun is so good, because people say you don't need a minigun, you can tune down like a Pro Lite or something like that, and you can tune it down, but you've still got a relatively big gun with a big pot. I was going to say something else then, but a big pot, haven't you? And you'll find that you'll be knocking everything with it unless you're really careful. And if you're that careful that you're not knocking something, you're normally not concentrating on your painting, and you can't always get into all the small nooks and crannies that you can with a minigun. So it's a minigun is a really good investment if you're doing stuff like this. And as I say, if you've got a spray can, then it's not so much of a worry, because a spray can is probably even more manoeuvrable than a minigun, but just not as adjustable. So you'll see there at the bottom, it's just slightly out of the picture, but I'm just going over that with a few really fine coats. I've just dialed it down, and that's where the spot was that I had to remove, and I'm just going over that area, and then you'll see me going back and forth with the gun, just with air coming out of it ready to dry it. And there you see I'm putting more on, and then you'll see that I stop again and just apply air to it, just back and forth with some air, and like that. And the reason for that is just to let it dry out, and you're just making sure that blemish is completely covered. And you really need to do it at this time, because when you're going to lacquer it, you want to lacquer ideally as soon as the paint's flashed off or dry. Maybe you might get away with the next morning if it's evening and you want to go to bed or whatever. You might get away with the next morning, but you shouldn't leave top coat on for too long before you apply your lacquer, because the top coat starts to harden off, and then the lacquer doesn't have such a good adherent to the paint, and what you'll find is it will start to peel. You know, it might not be for 6 months, might not be for 12 months, but it will start to peel. And once it starts to delaminate like that, then you're back to square one. If you do get to a stage where you do the base coat like this, and you're not well or something like that, so there's a reason why you can't do it, then go over it with something like a grey Scotch-Brite, and be really careful, because you can make marks on paint that when you lacquer you actually see the mark. So just go over it with a grey Scotch-Brite and be really careful, and that will give something for the lacquer to adhere to. Well, I hope you liked it. I'm sorry it went on for so long, but I thought it was best to keep it as it was, so that people realise that it doesn't take 5 minutes to paint the frame. It actually takes much more than that. Oh well, I'm coming to the end of the video now, so I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching, and thanks to all the subscribers, much appreciated. Bye bye, cheers.